OutFront now, founding director of the New York City Veterans Alliance, Kristen Rouse, who served 3 tours in Afghanistan with the Army. She's given 25 years of service to this country. We appreciate you coming in today.
Thank you so much for having me.
This really started quite a conversation, and the question itself is a great one. How has your service impacted you? These responses, do you think this is what the Army expected?
We're going on 18 years of war, continuous war in multiple countries. The cost of these wars has been borne by our military, by our veterans community, by their families, who often feel invisible, ignored. And I think just with this tweet, it's so evident that veterans have so much to say that they haven't been heard on over these 18 years. And we also heard on this Twitter thread from individuals who served or whose families served well prior to 9/11. It shows that our veterans and military community really needs to be heard.
They need to be heard. We know too, I mean, the numbers are staggering every time we hear them, but these are coming from the VA. As many as 20% of veterans from Operations Iraqi Freedom and Enduring Freedom are now living with PTSD. And then they also give us the numbers on suicide. From 2008 to 2016, more than 6,000 veterans have died as a result of suicide every year. That is becoming more of a conversation. How much, though, do you think these tweets and even the conversation we're having right now may lead to a more constructive conversation in actually dealing with things?
We can't talk enough about it. It is wonderful that this is getting attention, that this really struck a chord with people, to see the individual stories. These are the stories that we see in the veterans community all the time. Mm-hmm. It's why veterans they came back from Vietnam and they formed organizations to advocate for veterans who were being left behind or unserved by the resources that were there for them. They created resources that they needed. Veterans returning from the wars that feel especially forgotten in the 80s and the 90s, they've needed resources this whole time. But veterans en masse have come back from our wars in Iraq, Afghanistan, and elsewhere to advocate for the veterans who are telling these stories, for the family members left behind by veterans that we've lost to suicide, to overdose, to all of these issues. But also veterans can feel isolated, and they can come home and be the great leaders that we've been trained to be, and come home and work great jobs and do great things, but still feel very isolated and forgotten by a nation that barely remembers that it's still at war. When we have colleagues, friends, families, loved ones who are still overseas, because that's part of our community. Mm-hmm. And so much of America, while well-meaning in saying we support our troops, we appreciate our veterans, they're not learning these stories.
Mm-hmm. And that's what they need to know. We have about 30 seconds left, but I want to make sure you have the time. When you pause on Memorial Day, who is it that you think of?
There are so many that I think of. And 3 deployments, there are so many stories, there are so many names, individuals who I worked with in our task force, Americans, coalition nations, Afghan forces, names and faces I remember. But what I wear on my wrist is the name of Sergeant Roger P. Pena. He died by enemy fire in Afghanistan in 2006. And I remember him especially today.
Thank you for sharing that with us. Thank you for coming in today, and thank you for lending your voice to the conversation. I hope we can continue it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.